Ladies and gentlemen, it is a Friday night, which is weird for us, but welcome to the Screen Sermon Podcast. Now, I guess for you all, it'll be Sunday like usual, but we're recording on a Friday. We usually record on Wednesdays. Had a couple of weird nights with technical issues, but it's B again, your host, and this week I'm sitting with Josh again.
Yep, back again for what, the second or third week in a row? Third?
I think this is our third. Yeah. I believe this is our third week in a row. We had Raiders, and then we had Coming Soon, and now this, and then you'll be on the show next week as well, but we'll have Cody with us too.
Shout out to all the Josh fans.
That's right. Anybody who's really into having Josh on the show, this is a good stretch of episodes to listen to. And this week we're dipping back into that international pool. So the first 10, there he is. Hi, Hero. The first 10 episodes of Screen Sermon, I believe we had 3 out of the first 10 were Indian films. And so we've kind of come to this conclusion, I guess, that once a month I wanted to look at least one international film. And so this will be the first time that we're moving away from India, and this time we're going to do a Spanish film. And it's a Spanish film that you introduced me to as far as recommending it for the show. And I remember I watched a trailer for it and was blown away by what I was seeing. And so that's the film we're going to be talking about today. So I guess for us English language speakers, the film is called Witching and Bitching. But it is known by its Spanish title, La Brujas de Zugarramurdi, or Zugarramurdi.
Right.
And it is, it's something, let me tell you. I after I finished the film the other day, folks, I ended up messaging Josh on Facebook, and the only thing I could really say was, what the hell did I just watch? And so I really want to just, I think, start us off by saying, well, first of all, thanks for introducing me to it. It was certainly an experience. I enjoyed the film. I don't want to have any misconceptions about it. I enjoyed it. Where the hell did you find this movie? How did you see this movie? What is your connection to it? I would love to know that story or know how that happened.
I first watched it in 2019, maybe 2018, as part of Bloody Disgusting's 31-day Halloween horror marathon. And day 3 was an international film, and they chose one from Spain, and it was this. And I knew nothing about it going into it, so I rented it on I don't remember the name of it, but Walmart's streaming service where you can buy and rent shit from there. Vudu, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So I rented it from there, and I watched it, and I went, "Holy shit!" I'm very particular about a few things in horror, and one of them is witches. I tend to not vibe with a lot of that stuff, and every once in a while, you'll find one that you just like, yeah, that got it right. That's exactly what I wanted, and this was that for me. So when you needed an international film for the schedule, I was like, I got one for you.
Yeah, you just threw it out there. We were building the calendar out, and I was like, okay, I think I have one open weekend for June. And we don't have an international movie yet, so I just need an international movie. And then all of a sudden, you just threw out there La Brujas de Zugarramurdi. And I thought you were kidding. I thought you were throwing a joke out there. And then only to, look it up, or I think you told me or something like that. It's a Spanish horror comedy or something like that. And then I looked into it more, and that's how I ended up seeing the trailer. So what is it about, before we really dig into the film, what is it about witch films that you find don't really make the mark most of the time? For example, I would say that what's his name, Robert Eggers' film The Witch is generally highly regarded by most folks. I don't know if you've seen it, But what is it about witches as they are depicted in film that generally that miss the mark for you?
I feel like as far as like the horror factor of horror, they don't really do it for you unless you do it a certain way. They tend to feel very campy or supernatural, but not like quite scary. More so as, you know, like a plot, like The Craft. I wouldn't consider that a straight horror. It's got some other elements to it. It's more. It ends up blending with another genre usually, and when it's done straight, like I hate the Blair Witch Project. I'm sorry, it's boring as all hell to me, and nothing happens in it, and the reveal is not worth the time spent watching it. I get the marketing aspect, which it's probably got the best marketing of any film of all time. But taking it for what it is, from a modern standpoint, as a film, it doesn't interest me. Whereas this film, I have seen The Witch, it's one of my favorites, and The Autopsy of Jane Doe is another one of my favorite witch films. I love that movie.
Okay. And yeah, so the Blair Witch Project, I mean, you and I think, have discussed it on the show before. If not, we've discussed it off show. The Blair Witch Project is one of my favorite horror movies. And I think it's a product of the time, because of our age difference and stuff like that. I think I was just the perfect age when it came out, and it scared the bejesus out of me because I bought it, like I believed it. And now looking back on it, it's definitely from, like, if I were to watch it today, I would view it from more of a nostalgia lens, and so I would enjoy it for that reason. But far be it from me, I really wouldn't describe it as much of a witch movie, just because, you know, there's not the typical stuff like, you know, the cauldron and there's no brooms in it and stuff like that. And I mean, really, spoilers, I guess, but you don't even see the witch itself. It's always stuff that's implied. And so I love that movie, but considering it a witch movie despite having witch in the title is kind of, you know, not really. I love Robert Eggers' The Witch. I think it's a fantastic movie. But usually when I think about witches and how they were depicted in films, my mind goes to two things. I forgot about The Craft, to be honest. My mind goes to The Wizard of Oz, naturally. And then beyond that, I would think about Hocus Pocus.
Right, but they're not... None of them that you mentioned are straight horrors, is what I meant.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, what about American... That's true. This is funny.
Right. This movie has enough camp to it that it reminds me in the vein of like you're watching 2 hours of Scooby-Doo.
Well, and speaking about Hocus Pocus, to me this felt very similar if Hocus Pocus had an R rating.
That's one of the ways that I would describe it to somebody if I had to do it for the first time. I compare this film a lot to Dusk Till Dawn.
Okay.
Because to me it feels like Hocus Pocus directed by Robert Rodriguez.
I think that's a fair way. Yeah, for sure. That's a really good point. So this film was released in September of 2013. It was filmed in Madrid. I don't know if you found this. I didn't see what its budget was, like what it cost to make it. I just saw that it grossed €7,422,695, and that $1,236,390 of that was in its opening weekend. I think the statistic was something around 22% of its total box office it made in its first weekend. But I don't know up against what kind of budget it was. When I was watching it, I assumed and guessed it was somewhere in the $20 to $25 million range. But I might be way off.
I mean, I don't have any concept of overseas how things do theatrically, because like if this was an American film, I don't think it would have went to theaters at all.
No, I agree.
So I don't know. I'd assume it went well, considering we've heard about it over here, and you know, the amount of stuff that you passes through a filter when it comes overseas is minimal compared to the amount of stuff that's put out overseas.
Yeah. And it was an IFC film, which I gotta tell you, back in the day, I used to watch, you know, DVDs and stuff like that from Hollywood Video, and a lot of the stuff that I was grabbing off the shelves for myself and Cody and Mick, you know, when we would all get together on weekends and stuff and have like movie marathons, a lot of the films that we were renting from video stores were these IFC films. I don't think I've watched an IFC film in a long time. So it was kind of nice to see their distribution logo at the front of a film that I was watching for the first time in many a year. And I explained it to you over the chat that this film for me was a tale of two acts, you know, if you were going to take it from a 3-act structure. And for some reason, it just lost me in the middle. It didn't like completely lose me where I thought it was a bad movie. It was intensely interesting in the beginning, specifically the opening sequence. Like the first 15 to 20 minutes is a roller coaster. And then the last 15 to 20 minutes is a roller coaster. And then all the stuff in the middle is just that. It's the stuff in the middle.
So, Alex de la Iglesias, I haven't seen any of his other films yet before this, but I do know a little bit about him, and you could pick this up from this movie too. Evidently, he has this like really unique, messed up sense of humor that he puts in his films. Well, when I was reading the synopsis, because I went back and I reread the original article that put me onto this, and it mentioned his film before this, and it described it, it's called The Last Circus, and it's described it as a film about a fat clown in a Pope outfit firing huge machine guns.
Yeah, he's got some serious... trying to think of who I would liken him to for American film. I
said Rodriguez and Tarantino.
I mean, that would make sense. Who's the guy that made who's the guy that made it might be Michael Bay that I'm thinking of. It was the Mark Wahlberg movie where him and his buddies are all like beach bum weightlifters, but they end up involved in some kind of heist, and I think The Rock is in it. I can't remember. I think it's a Michael Bay movie. He strikes me as the type, though, who is similar to like a Michael Bay. I mean, in the beginning of this film, you have characters dressed as street performers in the middle of Madrid. At least I think they're in the city proper. And you've got a guy painted up silver but dressed like Jesus Christ. You have a guy painted up green like a plastic army man, although his rifle is still the natural color, so he didn't go the full 9 of painting his rifle green. You've got a Minnie Mouse out there, you've got a Invisible Man, and you've got a really weird and creepy looking Spongebob. And a Patrick. There's a Patrick out there too. And these guys end up getting into a goddamn chase down the street with the police officers, where you got SpongeBob with a Tech-9, like shooting automatic fire at cops, and he ends up getting gunned down. It's just this like fever dream of like iconic or cartoon characters and things like that getting into this bizarre heist shootout thing with the cops. And that was obviously this is how the film opens. And there's a little kid involved, and the plastic army man soldier character is carrying him, and he's dual wielding pistols shooting at the cops. It was a very wild opener. And really, I think that it set this film up a little bit for potential disappointment, because when you open with something wild like that, the rest of the movie has to reach that to a certain degree. And it had a difficult time doing it until we got to the third act.
Yeah, I noticed some things in there, because this is, I think, my third time watching this film. I noticed some things I didn't catch before. like just
Mm.
the background extras. So when SpongeBob gets gunned down, a person in the Patrick Star outfit's like mourning over him.
I missed that. That's really funny.
Yeah, I thought it was hilarious. Yeah, it's a good setup. I would argue, because it's listed as an adventure, fantasy, crime, horror, action, thriller, comedy, romance.
It's all the genres.
I would argue that this is where all the crime comes in. And there's a lot of foreshadowing in the first act too.
Tell me more. What do you mean?
Well, I'd be getting into more of the end of the first act, but before the heist kicks off, they mention needing gold, and so they rob a jewelry store, and it's like primarily wedding rings because of how much they hate women, and they're like, screw marriage and everything. I'm recording this podcast right after I got married too.
Mazel tov, by the way.
Jose, he refers to, because he doesn't like women, he's very misogynistic. Mm-hmm. He has a few lines, all dropped in the first act about, women being just a bunch of witches, and he says things like, women are like a coven.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that dropped in. There's also just a lot of good lines, I would argue too.
Yeah, I think I missed some of the some of the spoken humor, and I was more, because it was a first time viewing, I was more locked into like the visual stuff, like how bizarre it is for SpongeBob to start getting punched out by a cop, and then he gets gunned down by him and stuff like that. Just the absurdity of it all. But the actual like spoken dialogue, like I certainly made notes about things that were being said, but individual jokes, I didn't really find too many that stood out to me. There was just a whole lot of a constant through line of the couples in the film, the couples that are being referenced, or the ones that are on camera. None of them are happy, or none of them are together anymore. It's just all of the ones that had any form of a relationship, it ended up falling apart.
Right. I mean, Tony, he kind of counterbalances that when they get in the getaway car, because Jose's talking about how he hates women and everything. He's like, not me, I love women and all that. Yeah. So he's not in the same boat. And then they eventually convince the driver to say screw it, and he throws out his wedding ring. And he just joins part of the
Manuel. I like him.
I think he's my favorite character.
Yeah, I think so too. I love that he's involved basically in a carjacking, and then he has the fastest case of Stockholm Syndrome you've ever seen. Within 30 minutes of knowing these guys, he's like, I think I'm just going to join this heist, because I also am pissed at my wife or ex-wife or whatever.
Yeah, while you were watching it for the first time, and you had to, I wouldn't argue that I didn't pay attention, but you had to pay more attention to like the plot and what's going on. I tried to catch little snippets, like when Jose's wife calls him on the phone. The contact name is Armageddon.
Armageddon, yeah. I made a note about that too. I thought that was a great touch.
Manuel goes, I need to call my wife, and Jose looks at his phone and throws it out the window.
So I guess just like as a quick plot synopsis, you've got your principal characters. So you've got Jose, Tony, and then Jose's son Sergio. They pull a heist of a gold exchange store, basically like a pawn shop almost. They have the help of a couple of other character actors that are out in the streets of Madrid. They end up carjacking a cab when Tony's girlfriend just takes their getaway vehicle because she has no clue that, obviously, of what's going on. They teased some dialogue right there, by the way. Tony was talking about how, I'm not sure how she knows, but she just knows like where I am at all times, or knows what I'm doing and things like that. And I felt like they were foreshadowing that Tony's girlfriend was going to end up being revealed as a witch as well, but that never really happens. But essentially these guys carjack this taxi cab. Along the way, the taxi driver ends up joining their cause as well. They end up driving through the Spanish countryside trying to get to France in order to escape with all these stolen wedding rings and engagement rings that they've got. They end up going to the town of Zugarramurdi, which has a very dark history with supposed witchcraft. Specifically, it was probably the most brutal form of the witch trials during the Spanish Inquisition was in this town. And so that's kind of the history behind it. And then, of course, they end up running into a gaggle of witches and chaos ensues. So that's kind of a general synopsis of the film. But yeah, I mean, at first when I was thinking about the title, the English version of the title, I was like, Witching and Bitching is just such a silly ass name for a film. But by the end of it, when I had watched the whole thing, I was like, oh, I kind of get it. Because the major parts of the film are essentially these women doing their witching stuff. They're doing ritual, that there's a main ritual that they're trying to accomplish, and they're just in general, whenever they're on screen, doing a bunch of witch stuff. And then the rest of the movie, that a lot of the dialogue is just people bitching. They're bitching about their wives, they're bitching about their lives, they're bitching about their job, they're bitching about everything, about the scenario that they're in. And so, yeah, it ended up being a very apt title for the film. I was like, why not just call it The Witches of, Zugarramurdi? But, that's not really a good enough explanation of what is actually happening in the film. There happen to be witches of Zugarramurdi in the film. It's not really what the movie's about, though.
Yeah, it's a coven of feminist witches against a group of criminal misogynists. Right. I would assume that they chose a funnier title to convey the humor a little bit more up front, rather than have you put it in and then go, oh, this is a horror comedy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the title of the film, at least the English title of the film, and then the cover, like the box art or the thumbnail for the film itself of Maritsu, or Marichu, I think it's Maritsu. She's like the grandmother in the witch coven. So you've kind of got your main three witches. That makes sense because it kind of counteracts your main three adult male cast members. And so you've got Maritsu, who's like the matriarch, like the grandmother. Or I guess she's not the matriarch, she's the grandmother. Then you've got Gracie, or Gracie, and she's like the matriarch of the family. So she's Maritsu's daughter. And then you have her daughter, Ava, who's played by Carolina Bang, who is the director's wife. And she's kind of the young rebel out of the three. And they're kind of your witches proper. And on the cover, the box art or the thumbnail art for this film, it's Maritsu, the grandmother witch, and it's her very strange evil witch face, and she's got her dental appliance, which we actually see in action during the film. She's got the teeth from James Bond villain Jaws, for anybody who's familiar with the character. But his are permanently affixed to his mouth. Hers, she can just pop in like a mouthpiece, and she's got biting teeth. So she's got those in for that thumbnail photo. It's a very funny picture, and then with the title Witching and Bitching, you kind of know what you're getting into. It's going to be a funny movie, but it's kind of creepy.
I thought that her the tooth thing was, and I could be off the mark with this, but I thought it was an homage to London After Midnight. it's a lost film, but there's stills of it that've gone around. A early silent horror film starring Lon Chaney.
Okay. And what's the connection? Because I've never heard of it or seen it.
I mean, I don't know. It's a lost film.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like a I guess like it's presumed that there was a similar dental appliance or something in that film.
There are pictures of the character in it, and he has teeth like that. I think it was supposed to be a vampire film, but only images exist. The whole film is one of those thousands of films early in film history that was destroyed for one reason or another and was never able to be recovered.
Gotcha. Well, while we're on the subject, just real quick, how do you feel about the way vampires get depicted in film? I know there's kind of a wide flavor. Have you ever seen like vampires depicted the way that you would want them to be depicted in film?
Yeah, but I feel like there's I feel like vampires go hand in hand with at least many interpretations of it go hand in hand with romance really well, so it sets it up for, even if it's not like a teen horror thing. You see, even the 1931 Dracula film had romantic elements, and ever since that came out, I feel like a lot of films have borrowed from that aspect of the creature in their depictions of it, even though occasionally it's played straightforward. For instance, coming later this year in August, The Last Voyage of the Demeter is directed by Andre Averdal, is supposed to be what is essentially Alien, but on a boat.
Ooh, I'm in. I love the original Alien.
And 2, and then that's it.
I love it. I love Aliens as well, but yes, that would be where my fandom stops. Alien, 1979's Alien is also probably in my top 5 in terms of horror films.
Oh, that's an episode that would, and it's coming one of these days, and it's going to give me so much anxiety.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're talking about doing our Mount Rushmore of like horror icons or something like that, and that can be whatever it means to you. And that's coming up in August, I think, sometime, or late July. And even that's hard, but yeah, to try to narrow it down and do like a top 5, it's definitely something we'll have to tackle at some point. But getting back to Witchin' and Bitchin', excuse me for not putting G's at the end of those words. It's a very it almost turns into like a road trip film in the middle, when it's literally just those guys driving and like weird shit happening. And they come upon, so they complete this heist and then they're taking off. I feel like they're in the car forever. And one of the funniest, I think one of my favorite parts about the movie is the cab has a patron in the back.
Oh, Barriaz?
Yeah.
I was wrong.
And they end up
my
just
favorite character.
he's amazing, and they end up driving around with this poor dude for the longest time, and then they finally decide to toss his ass in the trunk. And I kept forgetting he was there, which really, I have to give it up to the writing on this one. I kept forgetting that he was in the trunk, but after enough amount of time would pass, they would throw another gag in with him, and I'm like, oh yeah, they got that dude in the trunk, and then it would make me laugh all over again. Like, I love that they stop at the pub, or like the bar, and the bar is called Maritsu, which is the same name as the grandmother character, which I looked up, and it evidently means bitterness, which just continues to kind of weave its way into that theme of bitching, right? Or just this discontent between all the couples or anybody that's affiliated with anybody else in the movie. They all are bitching at each other. And they get them, like, they have this weird interaction in there. They get some food and they use the toilet and they see the dude in the toilet, or they think that there's a creature in the toilet or something like that. But when they come out, they have some food wrapped up in like tinfoil, and they open up the trunk and they toss it to the dude in the trunk to feed him. And like, A, I forgot the dude was in the trunk, and then B, they kind of lead into it by having him yelling at them and like cursing them to hell and calling them bastards and motherfuckers and shit like that, and being mad at him for keeping him locked in the trunk. And then they open it up and toss him his food, and he goes, "Oh, thank you, my friend." And then they close the trunk back on him. So that was a fun through line, and he ends up getting out of the trunk toward the end as we go into the third act stuff.
The first time, they just don't want him anymore. They just toss him out.
Well, they're about to cross the border, so they toss his ass out because they don't want the French border patrol to search their car. That's what I assumed.
And then they have to they have to come back, so they just put him back in the truck.
Yeah, and then he starts cursing them again, and he's back to the motherfuckers and you're a bastard and all this other stuff.
He says, "I already forgot your faces. In fact, who doesn't steal nowadays?"
It's a great line. Let's talk about the witches in this movie. So now that you mentioned it, so I need to, full disclosure, like a lot of the times when I watch films and then we do shows about them, I end up talking a lot about effects or like cinematography and the way things are shot and stuff, because I'm a big style whore. And then beyond that, I get into like performances, and those seem to be like the top two things that catch my eye. I basically have no notes about cinematography or performances specifically. Instead, what I focused on was the plot, like in the writing. And let's talk about the way that witches are portrayed in this film. So as you stated, they're very much like feminists, and there is a ritual that they need to complete in order to essentially bring about the end of the world. That's what I got from it. Or like they're trying to start from ground zero and kind of start over again. Because the world sucks and, the people in it are terrible. And they are trying to conjure up this, like, she's like the original mother witch thing. I don't know if I'm getting that completely wrong.
What they're trying to do is they need their goddess deity to show them the chosen one, the one that will betray they need a young boy who will grow up to betray men that'll be on their side. And in order to do that, which we find out later in the film, is the deity has to swallow them, and then he has to survive being passed through. If he survives being passed through, then he's the chosen one, and he'll go on to be on the witch's side, pretty much like undercover. As he's a dude, but he's going to lead to the downfall of men.
So what I don't understand about that, so first of all, they foreshadow that in the beginning when Sergio, the little boy, goes down the creepy parade float slide thing where he goes into the mouth of it looks like a big parade float character, and it has an open mouth.
Wasn't that the Igor character that with the witches that told him that?
Yes. Maritsu's husband, I guess, whatever his name was.
Yeah, I don't remember it, but he essentially functioned because all the men in the witch family are essentially servants or less than. For instance, her son is chained up and barely alive.
So that's what I was going to ask you about. His name is Louis.
Yeah.
But didn't he say that he was swallowed by the witch goddess and he survived? So how was he not the chosen one?
It might have been, I didn't catch that either, so I'm pretty sure that it had to have been established in somehow, and either we both missed it, or it could have also been something that was lost in translation.
Okay. Yeah, because he's very much alive, and like you said, he's chained up underneath the bar.
I wouldn't say he's very much alive.
Well, I mean, he is alive. He has, his skin is falling off. He looks like a zombie, but he lives underneath the Maritsu bar, and the creature that we were seeing in the toilet was actually Louis, because the two toilets lead down into the chamber where he lives, basically. And
real quick,
yeah,
I don't really know anything about Spain. Those toilets, if that's what the toilet situation is like in Spain, man, that sucks. And that could be because I'm a spoiled American, but
yeah,
man, that looks unfortunate.
It's literally it's like a hole in the ground, and you just kind of squat over it. And
stand there, do a squat and shit.
Yeah. I think what we're spoiled by is having water in the bowl that carries our waste away, and that is not happening when you're just a hole in the floor. So yeah, I mean, I really just kind of wanted to dig into the witch behavior, or like some of the witch tropes here. So like, we meet them from the beginning, and they are doing like some fortune telling, or like doing some portents kind of thing where they're trying to read the future, and they establish our opening scene for us. And it sounds like nonsense when they're talking about like a yellow sponge, and and they basically name drop everything. And then of course when we meet our characters during the heist, there's a Spongebob, and all the characters line right up with all the nonsense they were just talking about. They seem to be cannibals. They eat people.
Yes.
Their magic is undefined. It's very much they can just kind of do shit, whatever it is they think of to do. It doesn't seem to be governed by, any kind of specific lore or rules that we need to remember. And they're very animalistic at times. They turn into creatures when they're crawling along the walls, or there's certainly a scene. There's more. This happens more than once, but Ava is the one that does it the most, where she's basically like screeching like a bat when she's upset about stuff.
Yeah, it seems like the film blends together, because witches and what they do and how they act differ from culture to culture. What we think of as our standard European witch from folklore, but there are other like banshees and other parts of the world have their own takes on witches and vampires and zombies. So you get a lot of non-Western witch influences, to where it's not hocus pocus-esque, waving a wand and whatnot. However, throughout the film, they do sprinkle in a lot of what we know as the standard witch tropes, and they're more so Easter eggs than anything. For instance, the Mother Witch, when before she knew that Sergio was the chosen one, she was just gonna fucking eat him.
Yeah. And he was in a big roast pot with an apple in his mouth.
Yeah. What his mouth? And then you have that scene where they find one of the female witches, Ava. That's what it was. That's the word I was looking for. Mm-hmm. They find Ava, and she's trying to like seduce them, and she's riding the broomstick.
Yeah, she's like grinding against the handle of the broomstick and stuff. That's after she's like pouring the frog blood all over herself.
Yeah, it's. I think that was a play on words, because she's riding it. Mm-hmm. So they have
very clever.
They have very. I will. I have. Throughout there, I noticed that they have a bunch of stuff like that sprinkled in. My first time. Are we gonna transition to not say the final act, but what the penultimate deity is? Their goddess.
Yeah.
Can I spoil that now? Right. Yeah. So the first time I watched this, and they pretty much say up front in the opening title sequence, they have Venus figurines up there, which represent fertility. They're the earliest. You could say, you can make an argument about what it's for. We don't exactly know the form of pornography, but they're worshipped for fertility. And the giant goddess is just a giant living Venus figurine with big, fat, floppy tits. So when I first watched that, I thought that was really cool because they took an artifact from history and were like, yeah, we've been worshipping this thing the whole time. And it checks out, not that that's actually what happened, but it checks out because that's something that we've known about going back to, prehistoric times that we can only assume the meaning of. So they take that and they're like, yeah, the witches have been around that long. That's what that is. And I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, it was definitely unexpected. They kind of teased it ahead of time because we saw it in like paintings on the wall and things like that. You see that character depicted a couple of times throughout the course of the film. I want to say during the opening credits as well, which by the way were hilarious, where they're showing a lot of recognizable female faces and stuff from around the world. The only two I remember off the top of my head, I know there was one of the most prolific serial killers in British history, and I'm blanking on her name right now. She was one of them, and was Bathory? So Bathory's not the one I'm thinking of. She's more modern. I want to say she did her killing in like the 60s or 70s.
What?
Yeah, I can't remember her name. And I think she had a male accomplice. They were kind of like a Bonnie and Clyde, but instead of robbing banks, I think they killed a bunch of people or something like that. I cannot remember this character's name.
Elizabeth Bathory is the one who would bathe in their blood.
Yeah. And so the one I'm thinking is more from modern times, somewhere within the last 3 or 4 decades, maybe.
She was the 14th century Bathory.
Right. And then, so since I can't remember this other one, I know Margaret Thatcher, the politician Margaret Thatcher, was also in there as well. So, yeah, just giving us a few like visual, like, hey, these are some of the famous witches through time. And during the opening credit sequence when they're doing that, we definitely see the image of the goddess. And then I think we see her like on a cave wall, like she's drawn or painted on a cave wall later and stuff. So they definitely tease it, but I still was not expecting that to be the creature that rounds the corner when it's time to see it. And I remember as they're setting the ritual up, the ritual is bizarre. I made a bunch of jokes about it in my notes that it was like, this looks like a rave. This looks like it looks like a rave. It looks like if like they were having a big cookout in Zion, like in the Matrix, because it's literally in a cave. And when they started bringing out the giant fork and the giant knife, and they're putting it at the giant table, I'm like, what the fuck is happening in this movie?
Yeah, I wrote comically large silverware.
It looked like a sketch comedy like skit. So yeah, I'm just very, very questioning like where are they going with all this? And then of course when that like, so you said it's Venus, right?
Yeah, they're called Venus figurines.
Okay, so
they
when that
names per one that was made, but that's what's colloquially known them to be. Because they each have, it's like the whatever figurine of whatever that place it was found. Just the one that this is based on was it was one of the creature design in this is based on a specific Venus figurine. I know that it was made of limestone. They don't show that one in the intro, from what I understand. They show some of the other ones that were made of like clay or ivory or stuff like that. This is like the main one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why it's the main one, but it's the one that's like most commonly known.
So yeah. It's also like a bizarre character design, or like it must be based on some kind of original figurine, like you're saying, because like it has like the wicker like mask.
Yeah, that's present in the sculpture, but I mean, I'm not a paleontologist, so I couldn't tell you what it means. But I'm not sure if anyone actually knows what it means, because none of the Venus figurines had faces. And the one that this is based on had, I don't know if it was supposed to be wicker. It's commonly thought that it's like hair or a hat, but that's what it looks like in the actual historic piece. So I guess this is their interpretation of what that was supposed to be.
Okay. And that ends up being the creature's weakness, because when Ava rips it all up and exposes her eyes, that seemed to be all it took to finish her off.
Yeah, that sequence reminded me of God of War 3 when you're doing the Kronos boss fight and you're like crawling all over him and shit.
Yeah. When that happened, so Ava ends up going against the Coven because she loves Jose.
Yes.
And she jumps on the goddess's back and is trying to defeat it. And this is before or after? I can't remember. She also ends up having like a Dragon Ball Z flying around and fighting interaction with her mom. So her and Gracie end up having a battle as well. And that's where I was making notes about, like, this film has completely lost its mind, which is hilarious considering everything we've seen up to this point. But and it's also where I feel like the effects got pretty bad. Like, there's CGI blood throughout, but like they didn't pay for squibs. It was like all the bullets and stuff like that, it's all CGI gunshots that you're seeing. Like SpongeBob, when SpongeBob gets pieced up, it's all CGI blood splatter. And then
it's pretty noticeable when you're because the third act it has so much CGI, and there's so many witches in that cave too. And actually my exact quote had nothing to do with the cookout. I said, this looks like the party from Zion if it were a pep rally, because there's a lot of like gals playing the drums and stuff, like they're in an orchestra. And mind you, throughout the first act, the second act, and the third act, and mainly in the second act where there's a lot of in the car dialogue, the jokes don't stop at any point. The humor, it just keeps going and going and going. From the whole time you have Badiaz in the trunk, and then they put him back in the trunk, and then they have this Texas Chainsaw Massacre-esque dinner scene. Yeah, and then I only bring that up because that's the first time that when shit starts going, it's just like, and then it just starts. There's no build. They go through the ceiling, and then they just start fighting. Yeah. And whenever there's a sequence like that where the action picks up, there's never a build to it. It just, all of a sudden, it starts. The only time you really get any build is when you have that loud guttural growl and the heavy stomping of the goddess. Other than that, it's just, you got humor, and then we're gonna stop for a second and do some shit. Because even the final act, they're still cracking jokes throughout the whole thing. Like,
that never stops.
He holds up a cross and Ava goes, "What are you doing?" He's like, "No idea." And much like that, similarly, what are you saying? I don't know. Tony starts chanting the same thing the witches are chanting underground. And then Jose turns to him and goes, "What the hell are you saying?" He's like, "I don't know, I got carried away." So they don't really take it too seriously either, the characters, as well as the audience. It's supposed to be fun and campy.
Definitely. And it's that.
A good blend of the two genres, I would argue. Even though it is, when you have multi-genre films, it always leans towards one more than the other, usually. This is primarily a comedy.
And so, what do you think the commentary? Because like, there's definitely got to be some kind of a commentary going on about relationships, because the witches, they do this ritual to try to bring the goddess back every year, and they've done it for 30 years in a row. This year they think they've got everything they need because they believe Sergio to be the chosen one, plus they have all this negative energy because of the gold. All these gold rings are full of broken promises and, loves that fell apart and things like that, so all that negative energy is going to help them fuel the apocalypse, basically. And so that's part of the premise. And then, like we said, you've got Jose, who is separated from his wife, so Sergio's mom. They have a tenuous relationship in the film, as Sergio's mom is coming to look for him after she gets wind that he was involved in the heist as well. Maritza and her husband have a very specific relationship where she's clearly the domineering one over him, treats him like an annoyance, treats him like a servant, that kind of thing. Manuel hates his wife or ex-wife and stuff like that, and willingly joins a group of robbers just to have a group of guys to associate with who are going through similar experiences as him. And then Ava, even Ava falling in love with Jose, they have that whole sequence where she's essentially trying to convince him to abandon his son and all of his friends to leave with her. And then they have a very classic, like almost a sitcom level conversation where they're depicting Ava as being, just a walking trope, an emotional woman where no matter what you say, it's wrong, and it causes her to be more upset. And, you're just saying what you want me to say because you think that's what you want me to say, but it's not what you actually feel. And then, like, Jose's in a place where he's like, well, then I'm not really sure what to say to you. Like, I don't know what to do. And he's just kind of lost in that situation. And then he ends up kissing her, and then she has one of those fits where she lays on the ground and screams like a banshee. So, yeah, what is the commentary that they're saying about relationships or about the two genders and how they interact with each other? Like, what did you take from that?
I think the filmmaker himself, I think it's pretty much straightforward. He's showing two extremes, two groups with essentially similar beliefs: women that hate men, men that hate women, and then just the clash between them, and then playing it for laughs. I think Alex de la Iglesias actually said, don't take it too seriously. There's no deep themes there. I think he tried to stress that don't take it seriously. This movie's about having fun. It's not about making us. I think he tried to stress that he's not trying to make a statement, because a lot of films, in 2023, which it's a very political time to be with everything going on. Whenever you have something that tries to touch on a subject, and it not even necessarily politically, because a lot of and way too many also horror films try to touch on the concept of grief. I think they often try to be very metaphorical throughout, and that's not always necessary. There are times where you make a film from point A to point B, and it's about telling a story and having fun, and there's no real message. Now, you can have some deeper things in there, like character development and showing different aspects of different beliefs, but you can do that without coming out of it saying, here's the moral of the story. So I think that's what he was going for. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that he didn't want it to be seen as, this is me making a statement with this film, even though, thematically, there's a lot that you could take from it, which those films are nice when even if there's not trying to say something, you can come up with your own interpretations to it.
I feel like that lends even more credence to my Michael Bay argument, because I don't think he ever meant anything behind any of his films. It's Michael just, Bay, I want to see some stuff happen.
Went on record saying he makes films for kids to enjoy with lots of explosions.
I mean, and there's a place for it, you know. Sometimes, I mean, I'm with it. Sometimes I just want to turn my brain off and not have to try to think about the themes or try to think about, you know, X, Y, and Z while I'm watching a movie, and I just want to be entertained for a little bit. You know, and
it could work, and it could also not work.
Yeah. Because a lot of times you can see something for what it is and just say, this is an empty film. Like, there's just nothing to it. It's just a husk of a movie.
But sometimes you can watch films and say, you know, that was fun, I enjoyed it, but you don't have to think too long on the meaning. And there are films that, like, I just watched, and I won't spoil it because you haven't seen it. There are films like The Boogeyman, which just came out, which is trying to be very metaphorical, and it misses the mark because, one, it doesn't do anything new, and two, the metaphor is not necessary, especially when it's based on that source material. You don't need to add that extra layer. And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes you have a very straightforward film with a very simple plot, and the whole thing is not even one metaphor, but multiple sometimes. My biggest example of that being Nope, which the Jordan Peele film, which came out last year and was extremely good.
No, I love that film as well, and I understand what you're saying. And so I guess to wrap it up, we get, so everything ends up working out in the end, right? They they stop the Armageddon, sort of. Sergio gets eaten. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I cut you off by mistake.
Well, I was going to say Sergio is eaten by the goddess and comes out the other end, literally, and is alive. And then he seemingly is now also in possession of some kind of supernatural powers. Our principal characters end up getting away from the witch coven after the goddess is defeated and after Gracie is defeated. And the end of the film, we get a school magic show, and it's depicted as 1 month later. And Jose is now in a happy relationship with Ava, who has seemingly left the coven, I guess. And they're all sat in the auditorium, and literally it's just like this ensemble of everybody that we just had through the story. So you've got Jose and Ava, you've got Tony and his girlfriend, you've got Manuel the cab driver's there, the fucking trunk guy is there.
Oh yeah. Which, by the way,
I keep forgetting his name.
They never name him. No, that's not his name. That's just what they call him. They never name him. They call him that because he keeps saying, "I have a work meeting. I need to get to Badia." So they just start calling him.
Oh, that's right. It's the place he's trying to go.
Yeah, they never says his name.
I love that he survives the actions that happen to him in this film so that he can be there at this kid's magic show at the end. Like, why would he be there? I love that.
It's very Scooby-Doo-esque, in my opinion. The way they're like, okay, and here's everybody that was in the film, smile for the last scene. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, it gives me it reminds me of something, and not just Scooby-Doo, and I can't think of what it is. The thing that comes to mind is like middle school special, like you know, like an 80s film where the credits roll and it just shows you all the characters, like this guy grew up to do this and all that. You know what I'm trying to say?
Like The Sandlot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very weird comparison to make for this.
If The Sandlot were a horror movie about witches. So yeah, I mean, we get a happy ending. They kind of not even tease, but set it up so that if they wanted to do a sequel, I guess they could, because somehow or another, despite all the things that they've been through, our three witches proper are also at the school auditorium watching the magic show. So now you've got Maritsu, Gracie is there, and Sergio's mom, who gets turned into a witch a little bit after that dinner scene that you mentioned earlier on. she has now kind of taken Ava's place.
She she has some good dialogue with Jose when they have that confrontation in the last act before the epilogue. Where Jose says, "Yes, I know I brought my son to an armed robbery. Yes, he was eaten by a monster. What do you want me to say?"
And she looks like there's a couple of Sam Raimi things in here that I definitely noticed. And you talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre parallel during the dinner scene, I definitely noticed that because I had made a note about there being some Texas Chainsaw vibes when they arrived at the Maritsu bar. Just that kind of like family-owned restaurant, and the people in there seem very odd and off-putting and stuff like that. And then there's the obvious like cannibal, the cannibalism link as well.
Yeah, even in the marketing, in the like film descriptions, it specifies that they're not just witches; they're cannibal witches.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to the witches in Cabin in the Woods, where there are two types: are witches and sexy witches.
That's a good movie. But yeah, the Raimi stuff, that's right. So at one point, Ava bitch slaps Jose through a window, and they do the very obvious Raimi shot where you stay with Jose, but everything is rushing past him at high speed. It just reminded me of a shot that Raimi would do. And then I forget the wife's or the ex-wife's name, but Sergio's mom, her makeup after she gets turned into a witch is very evocative of Deadite makeup. Sylvia, that's it. Yeah. She looks like a Deadite when she's a witch, in my opinion.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah.
I didn't remember the epilogue scene from the first couple times I watched this. So when I watched it again, for the third time, and it could be I just have goldfish brain and I just forgot it. I never remembered that they teased the sequel. I love this film. I hope it gets a sequel, just because, and I need to see more of the director's work too, but I hope this gets a sequel because it surprised me so much the first time I watched it with how much I enjoyed it. And the reason I jumped on it as like, let's do this movie for international film in June is because I needed somebody to finally talk about it with, because Lord knows nobody's seen it.
Well, and it's out there, folks, right now for anybody that's interested in watching this film. It's called Witching and Bitching, and I found it on Tubi, so it's free. Like you can watch it right now on Tubi. It'll have a couple of ads. It was not very intrusive. I think I had 3 or 4 ad breaks while I was watching it. It wasn't a big deal. The film was in Spanish, but it has English subtitles. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the opening heist section of the film and the meeting of Manuel and how that relationship kind of starts. And then I really enjoy the end of the film when the dinner scene starts and then leading into the ritual to bring the goddess back. The stuff in the middle is very kind of muddy in my head. And I think it's just because it doesn't reach the same level of absurdity as the two things that I've already mentioned at this point. And so they kind of get lost when they're bookended by such bombastic things.
It's
but all in all, it was fun.
It's just banter between them getting from point A to point B.
Yeah, it's the bitching part of the witching and bitching, where it's just them just bitching about relationships and women and their jobs and all this other stuff. And yeah, it's just a lot of things where you're like, oh my god, get over it, that kind of stuff. So there's some funny lines in there, and there's some funny back and forth, but you have to dig through a whole lot of people complaining to get to it. So all in all, though, fun movie. I had a good time with it. I would certainly recommend people check it out. Like I said, it's called Witching and Bitching, and it's on Tubi. And I'm glad that you introduced me to it. I don't want to cut you off. Is there anything else you wanted to say about it?
Just that, just to plug, not that we're sponsored or anything, just to plug Tubi real quick, I've noticed that they have so much cool shit that I find on there on a consistent basis for a free streaming service. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
I think it's worth us when we do the what is essentially our season 2 calendar. I think it's worth us just going through the Tubi catalogs and seeing what's available to us, especially for international films.
Yeah, I noticed they have a lot of foreign language films on there, and I think it would be easy for us to find some stuff hidden amongst that or Pluto TV to make sure that our international film options are being fulfilled, that once a month thing that we're trying to do. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. There's just a lot of things on there that I would be interested in seeing. And Alex de Iglesias, his body of work, as you said, now that I've seen Witching and Bitching, very interested to see what other films of his look like. And they may very well be on Tubi, or somewhere like that where they're easy to find. So revisiting him in the future for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I need to check out The Last Circus after reading that synopsis.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I mean, if you're okay, if you're all right, Josh, I guess we can wrap it for the week.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, so yeah, check the film out right now. It's on Tubi. I don't know how long it's going to be there. As Josh mentioned, we are going to be rolling into what I guess is going to be a season 2, and that'll be in August, in early August. And essentially, it's just going to be a formatting thing where we're going to focus on series of films and refer to them as arcs. So, for example, if we do like Hellraiser, we'll have a Hellraiser arc where literally every week we will review the movies in chronological order, starting with the first one. But in the middle weeks of those, we will interrupt them with other things like international film reviews, coming soon episodes, version versus version. And so however long it... Yes, and our first version versus version episode will be next week. We're going to take a look at 1958's The Fly and then 1985's The Fly with Jeff Goldblum, compare the two films, talk about which one we like better and why, stuff like that. So that's going to be me and Josh again, and then Cody will also be back on the show to do that with us too. So I'm very excited for that format, very excited for the new episode type, and very excited for season 2 when we can kind of do this thing where we do arcs. We tried to do the rankings episodes where we cover an entire franchise in one 2-hour block, and it's just people don't seem to be grafting onto those episodes very well. They're definitely difficult to edit because of how long they are, and so I think it's also difficult to give each one of the films in a given franchise the kind of love and care that you want to, because you feel like you need to move on to the next one for the sake of time. So with this new arc version of the show structure, I think we'll be able to really kind of dive into franchises and do the movies one at a time the way that they're supposed to be done. So I'm excited to do that. But in the meantime, folks, we're gonna call this an episode for the week. Please reach out to us on social media at Screen Sermon. That's on Twitter and Instagram. You can also find us on Facebook, and you can also find us via email, which would probably be the easiest way to correspond. Send us your questions, send us your feedback, send us any suggestions that you have for the show, or suggest movies to us or recommend things. So that's screensermonpod@gmail.com. I had a gentleman reach out to me, I think it was 2 weeks ago, basically asking if he could work for us so he could do editing and thumbnail art and things like that. And I had to be candid with him and say, right now I don't have the means to pay anybody to do that kind of stuff. If you're trying to build your portfolio or something, that's another thing. Certainly conversations I'd be willing to have with anyone. But with where the pod is right now, we don't have a staff. We are the staff right now until future notice. So, but reach out to us at, a screensermonpod@gmail.com, and communicate with us that way. And I'd be more than happy to answer any emails that I get. So, In the meantime, we hope that you all have a fantastic week. Please check out Witching and Bitching on Tubi. Please continue to support international and foreign language film. There's some really awesome stuff out there. Don't let subtitles scare you away, or the fact that they're not speaking English scare you away. There's some amazing filmmakers, some amazing actors and writers and directors out there. So open up your mind and go check them out. And in the meantime, Josh and I will let you go for now. Josh, thanks for being on there with me again, and see you again next week.
Yep.
All right. Good night, everybody. Have a great week.